Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wellspring Digital Chat. This is where, through the use of various social media platforms, we sort of stalk and collect data on various expert marketers for, uh, 10 years, compiling data, building up basically our case, and then when it's the time is right, we pounce and we get them, and we basically force their hand and force them to come and speak to us on this platform and share all of their information with us. Uh, Really, honestly, no harm, no foul. It works out great for everybody. So that said, I've never met Justin in real life, but I feel like I know him very well. Uh, Specifically because Justin has gone through some very public medical trials and been very upfront and honest and open about that. It was interesting, and I can say without a doubt that the marketing community, at least the ones that I know and I love, all love Justin, and we were all, just collectively out giving this outpouring of love and support to Justin as he went through his medical trials. And he can tell you more about that, and if he wants, but I think what I can also say is through all of that Justin definitely knows his stuff when it comes to digital marketing. So much so that he's on tons of podcasts and he's featured in a lot of those trusted best of lists, not the complete bullshit lists that feature people you've never heard of, but those lists that feature people where you're like, yeah, this is a good list. Anyway, Justin, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Please take a moment and introduce yourself to these fine folks.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say, of course, thank you for having me. And when I was going through everything 8, 9 years ago, I appreciated all the support that you provided and kind of check-ins, as well as, like you said, the broader community.
Yeah.
During that period of time, it was actually really interesting because I shared my story publicly without ever giving it a thought.
Mm,
Right. It wasn't something that I debated, though my wife really questioned it at times. It wasn't something that I debated. My perspective was that I wanted to tell my friends what was going on.
it was very genuine too. That was the interesting part about it, which made it so compelling is such a weird word to use, but I can't think of anything better to say. So
Yeah, and it was funny, like, months later, whatever it was, 2, 3 months down the road, Mark Schaefer and Tom Webster,
mhm.
2 phenomenal people, who I'm lucky to call my friends, were doing an, episode of their podcast at the time on transparency,
Mm,
and they both talked about this kind of, virtual waiting room when I was going through my brain surgery, and how they were waking up in the middle of the night to check their phones and all this stuff that obviously I didn't have a clue was going on.
right.
And the purpose of their conversation was to say that if they were going through that or anything remotely like that, they would have just kept quiet. They would
Right.
have gone silent essentially and just put their best foot forward, like most of us do through social.
Mhm.
Like I said, that was never even a thought for me. I mean, to the point that my wife really questioned why I wanted her to take a picture, minutes after getting out of brain surgery,
Right.
while I was in neuro ICU. So it's been this evolution over the years. I've been in social media professionally for 15 years and have seen the evolution of these platforms and how both individuals, with the building of their personal brands, as well as companies,
Right.
take advantage of these channels. And so I've led social globally for Fortune 500s. I've consulted with, everyone from a startup to, some of the biggest name brand companies that we all know.
Sure.
And now I find myself at Demandbase, and I lead influencer marketing and community for the company.
Perfect, because that's what I'm going to ask you about. See, it all works out. No, as I said earlier, I've been following you for years, and I'm very excited to actually get to talk to you, and hopefully maybe someday our paths will cross in actual IRL, as they say. But I have no doubt that there'll be some great information in this chat. No pressure. Are you ready?
I am. You're catching me at the start of my day. So hopefully I say something semi-smart.
Coffeeed up and ready to roll. All right. So you were quoted in I think it was in January this year, or no, last year. I'm sorry. You were quoted in a Analytica post last December. I don't know what that is, but I do now. Talking about predictions for 2023. So I thought we're about halfway into the year. And I wanted to check where you thought you were. So your prediction was that the importance of video, especially in B2B marketing, is going to increase this year. So here we are, 6 months in. I wanted to hear your thoughts about that prediction and how you think it's going.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think, like I said back then, it'll continue to increase.
Mhm.
But when you look at what I think, almost 6 months into the year, we see is, and some of it selfishly, right? Because it's things that we're doing at my company at
Sure.
Demandbase. But we've seen on one side, we've seen the explosion of TikTok. And it
Yeah.
was a thing last year. So it's not saying that they just came out in January or something like that. But
Right.
we continued to see the growth of the platform last year, and it's just exploded even more this year, especially for B2B brands. We're seeing more B2B brands kind of dip their toe in it, see if how they could get involved and if it
Mhm.
makes sense for them. I think previously, as with a lot of things, you saw B2C brands get in there because it made more sense. The
Right.
connection points were easier to understand. Where the small wrinkle comes into play with TikTok, obviously, is we're seeing them called before Congress and states are banning them. And so that's affecting things like state universities and
Mm.
government properties and what have you. But even no matter what happens with TikTok as a platform, we've seen this shift to vertical video, right?
Mm.
It
Okay.
because of our phones and the way they're naturally oriented.
Mhm.
Instagram Reels continues to grow. TikTok, obviously, YouTube Shorts is continuing to grow in popularity. It makes a lot of sense to be active there because of the power of YouTube.
Mhm.
So that is something I would see continue for the second half of the year. The second part
Interesting. Yeah.
is video does continue to grow. And I think where we're seeing more growth is the move away from just talking head videos. We're
Mhm.
so used to in B2B that style of interview and sitting down and having these questions. And podcast is one thing, right?
Mhm.
Podcast is a totally different beast. But when it's just like a 5-minute interview with our
Right.
customer type thing. And well, we still have that at Demandbase, and you have to have your customer testimonials and interviews with thought leaders and what have you. We've started to prove and make the case that B2B doesn't have to be boring.
Right.
And we do that with other content infographics and landing pages and whatnot. But, for the launch of some of our products, we did a take on an M&M video, and we did we're filming a video right now, or just filmed a video that is a take on a popular TV show for a product launch, and things of this nature that makes people laugh, that brings out an emotion out of someone, not just sit here and watch this 3 minutes around why
Yeah.
our feature's the best new thing to ever happen,
Right.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that we'll continue. The smart brands will start to do that, and
Yep.
that's what will create separation between B2B companies in content creation, are the ones that can break themselves away from thinking that they have to be born because that's what every other brand is doing.
It's funny. It's like I almost feel like B2B is the US and B2C is Europe. Europe does the cool hip things, and eventually, the US will catch on. They'll figure it out and go, okay, all right, I guess we're going to do that too. But it's almost inevitable that that B2B is going to dip their toe in the waters that B2C just due to full on cannonballing too. So it's interesting. So you, like I said, you've been doing this forever, and I've been following you for quite a while, and I'm just curious, like, looking back over the 10 years, if there's anything that really kind of surprised you, anything that kind of crept up on you that you really didn't expect.
Well, I think as we were
Everything.
talking about before we hit record,
Yeah.
Twitter's a dumpster fire now.
Right.
Facebook continues to be fined billions of dollars for their actions and taken to court and every other thing that you can imagine. And those nowadays, when we see the decisions that have been, or lack thereof, that have been made by the owners of those companies, they don't surprise us anymore.
Right.
However, if you were to rewind back 10, 15 years when these platforms were just launching or people were developing their personal brands or getting to know people, I think it is surprising for those people to look back and see something that was so good for so long, change. I met some of my closest friends through Twitter. I have
Same
friends
here.
that have met
Yep.
significant others through Twitter and things of that nature. You couldn't do that today.
No.
I started the whole medical journey on Facebook from the first night that I got to the hospital, and I checked in on Facebook. That's what started literally the entire journey of
Right.
journaling what was going on with me. And I did that for over 500 days and close to 200,000 words
Wow.
on Facebook,
Yeah.
as well as the website that spun off of there. But none of that, I think, can happen successfully now. And so if you had asked me a prediction 15 years ago or even 10 years ago, I could have never imagined kind of being in this place with those platforms.
Mm-hmm. I think the cynic would have been like, I saw it coming. Everybody's greedy and evil and wants to make money and blah, blah, blah. But I agree with you. I've met tons of people through Twitter and through Facebook and have become friends with a lot of people through those platforms. But all of that happened between the years of 2007 and 2000, 13, 14, 15. So, after that, everything kind of just went downhill. But, so as we're talking here, we're constantly facing a new influx of technology and trends. Now everyone can't help themselves and have to talk about AI. It's like every other word in a marketing sentence. But, in your opinion, how can we effectively navigate this ever-changing landscape while ensuring, meaningful progress? Is there any advice you can give on striking the right balance of not giving into the shiny object and sort of staying focused and staying, progress oriented in your work while not completely ignoring the new trends and new technology?
Yeah,
How do we
sure.
live in this world, Justin? Help us.
I think, well, there's plenty of people that are far smarter than me when it comes to AI. People like Paul Rotzer and Chris Penn, who is always smarter than pretty much everyone.
Yeah.
But
He was our first podcast guest, by the way.
Not surprising.
Yep.
But I think that AI is here and it's not going to go away right now.
Right.
So it is a shiny object. I had a friend the other day, predict, not publicly, and it's not someone that studies these trends, but just said, we'll probably see a AI bubble similar to we saw the internet bubble.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's true or not, I'm not putting stake in that, but my response to that was, you'll either see, it's possible to see something like that just because the run on every company
Yeah.
coming out as an AI company, or you'll see acquisitions, right? You'll just see
Right.
consolidation. And we saw that with social. You
Yeah.
had every platform imaginable, either someone out of business as these wars between like Twitter and Plurk and Friendster and all that happened. And Twitter and some of these platforms acquired some of them,
Right.
gobbled them up, or they just made their own features and the other ones went by the wayside. So I could see that happening in AI and with AI technologies or platforms. The the caution that I think, and I'm part of a broader content marketing team here at work.
Hmm.
The area that I caution people on, and I think is very dangerous, is thinking that AI is going to just take over for you.
Right.
Like, here, I'm going to tell ChatGPT that I need a 500-word blog post on social media
Right.
or on influencer marketing, and it's just going to spit back something, and I'm going to turn that and over to my boss and say, "Hey, I wrote my blog post for this week." Right? What it's meant for, one, it's only, and I've learned this from Chris, it's only as smart as the prompts you give it.
Exactly.
So if
And the
you say,
information it has access to.
yep. So if you say, write me a blog post on social media, it's going to give you what it can tell. It doesn't know that it should write it from a B2B marketer,
Hmm.
thought process that has experience in A, B, and C, and you want it to have a tone of educational, and it should be readable at this, grade level. And it doesn't know what it doesn't know. Therefore, it'll spit back something that's probably incorrect or far off base and takes you more time to correct. But I think where it really helps you is as a thought starter.
Right.
So, you might be tasked and just kind of staying on the blog post theme with, maybe you do have to kick out a blog post or 2 or 3 a week or whatever your company kind of has in place. If you're stuck or you're wanting to have a thought starter to then build off of, that's perfectly
Sure.
acceptable and a good use. I had one of our executives at work gave a speech and got the transcripts. It came out to be something like 100 pages long, right? Just because it
Okay.
was an
Yeah.
hour-long speech, and by the
Sure.
time you take all that and turn it into just text, it was long. He had ChatGPT help him, and of course, it took a lot of feeding into it just because the character limits and whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he was able to get that down to like 15 to 18 pages. That's manageable. And now you have a document that you could probably consolidate more if you want to, or you could rip 3 or 4 blog posts out of it, or content for an ebook or an infographic or what have you. That was from something that he had already done. So it's not net new. It was clean it up for grammatical issues, make it more readable, because, talking versus something that's you can read in thought
Right.
leadership content. That's pretty powerful.
Hmm.
Things
And
like
it's
that
original
are
thought.
great.
It's his original thoughts.
Yep. And you're just asking a tool to help you, combine it and consolidate it and things like that. But we still have a blog editor that's going to go through it and clean it up for tone and voice and all that good stuff.
So another shiny object recently, in at least the last, I don't know, 5 or so years, is influencer marketing. It's definitely gained a lot of traction, but I honestly, I've spoke to a few people on this podcast about influencer marketing, and I still don't think the broader public really understands what it truly is, especially when it comes to B2B. So I was wondering if you could explain how influencer marketing can work in B2B, and maybe if you have some success stories or best practices or just some anecdotes on how it's working in the wild, and maybe what people don't really truly understand it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. So I think, one of the things if that people don't realize is, we talked about how long some of these platforms have been around.
Mm,
B2B influencer marketing has been around in some form or fashion for 10 plus years.
sure.
Some of the top thought leaders in the space have run influencer campaigns, even if they weren't called that.
Right.
I recall, Chris Brogan and I used to work together and run an agency together. And we worked on a campaign where that client asked us to source people that had an influential voice to help them bring attendees to a webinar where they could communicate a key message.
That
Well,
sounds like influencer marketing.
but back then you would have never called it that, right? It was a social campaign because that's the agency we had. And that's how they were rotated. Their thinking was rotated at the time.
Right.
Over the years, as we've gotten closer to, now as we're recording this, 2023, it's just continued to increase. More funding and more people like myself are being hired by companies for full-time roles. And I think that's one of the major differences and why it's becoming more top of mind for folks. You have people, or some of the largest companies in the world, that are hiring people whose sole position is influencer marketing.
Right.
And that's where I think it's starting to turn heads, similar to when brands started to hire people to solely focus on social. People stepped back and were like, there must be something to this, right? This B2B brand is now suddenly hired someone full-time for social, and they have their social platforms all over the place. So, if you look at some of the stuff that I do and our team does day by day, and certainly other companies do, I would, look at it in a couple different ways. One, when you look at why influencer marketing, it's kind of simple in a way. It's that humans don't trust brands anymore, right? If you consider it, we have very little trust in need to trust a brand, but we trust other people, and we trust people who have over time created content in a form and a fashion that we identify with and that we have aligned values with. And maybe those people we've seen at conferences or read their books or subscribed to the podcast or whatever that may be, with the format that they choose to create content for their audience.
Like Chris Penn.
Or Jay Bear or Ann Hanley or, any of these folks. But those are folks that are kind of mega influencers, right? They tend to operate across the whole industry, say all of B2B marketing or AI or, whatever the case is. But then you have these other tiers of influencers all the way down to someone that might have 1,000 followers, say on LinkedIn, but that audience is very specific and very influential in that topic. So ABM or email marketing or whatever, your company focus area is. And so we do a couple things mainly to help drive relationships with influencers, because it's something that I strongly believe in, is that influencer marketing is not a one-way street. It shouldn't be something that brands just take advantage of. Hey, I've paid you, John, X amount of money. I want you to do A, B, and C, and I'll see you later. Maybe next time.
You're not wearing my shirt.
Yeah, exactly. So, we have worked on campaigns in two different ways and continue to. One, you mentioned it in kind of the intro, and it's these top lists. we will work on top lists that focus on a specific area that, might be a persona fit for us for the given time, or, something that we're trying to drive influence around. But we'll do our research based on a basic methodology that we've developed. And it's things like, yeah, reach matters, your followers, but that's not the only number or only factor. And you see some brands literally develop their list, the top 50X, and they'll use followers, but it'll throw back people that literally have nothing to do with that industry, or they're kind of untouchable, right?
Right.
And an easy example of that is, Gary Vaynerchuk will hit a lot of lists.
Right.
And
Right.
he is super influential in the space. Is Gary necessarily going to be influential for a Series B startup on AI? I don't know. But unless he's an investor or knows someone, the founders or something like that, that's a personal thing for Gary, he's probably not going to be connected to the company and help communicate the message. And they don't have access to him because he has a team around him, right?
Yep.
But if they reach out to that individual that maybe has 500 followers, but they do have reach, they have engagement, and not only do they have engagement, but they have engagement with the right community.
Right.
So they actively, if you look on, say, LinkedIn, if you're looking there, they have engagement on their content that they're creating, but they're also going and engaging with others that kind of look like them, right? Other sales executives or other marketing executives or AEs or email marketers or kind of whatever the focus area of your list is. So where the big opportunity here is, it's not just in what most brands screw up on, is just create the list, publish it, and move on.
Right.
What we'll do, and other brands do this too, is we'll develop the list, which takes a lot of hours for us to do.
Right.
We'll develop the list. We'll develop individual cards for each one of those individuals. So let's say, for example, it's 50 people are going to be on that list. We'll develop 50 custom cards, reach out to them one-on-one. Hey, John, you've been named to, top 50 marketers list. Here's a custom card with, your face and, title and all that good stuff on it. Here's some sample posts if you want to use them. If not, just congrats. You may or may not communicate it out. Obviously, we hope you do.
Right.
But then we'll go back, say 2 or 3 weeks later, and we'll reach out again and let you know that we want you to be featured in an ebook. So now we're deepening that relationship or reinforcing one that maybe we already had.
Right.
So you might, yeah, sure. I can give you take 2 minutes out of my day and give you an answer to this simple
It's a total
question.
win-win.
Yep. We'll take that. We'll create an ebook out of it, create multiple blog posts out of that.
Right.
And when we reach back out, we'll reach out with a quote card for you now to use. Because obviously the hope is that if you communicate it out, you'll say, Demandbase included me in this awesome ebook. Here's my quote from it. They made me this card. So now and then we have, for us, other opportunities. We have our podcast and we have our blog and we have DBTV, which is our stream and video network. And we have all these other touch points that we can co-create content with our influencers. So I think that's one bucket. And that's something that a listener literally could take the blueprint and start tomorrow as soon as they hear this podcast.
This what you just described to me makes perfect sense, and it's what I think of when I think of influencer marketing. But I can guarantee you that the average, 2, 3, 4 year in, marketing person, whether they're a coordinator or whatever, may or may not be thinking of it that way. They're thinking of just the Gary Vaynerchuks or just the whoever's who are these mega influencers. and they're not thinking about, maybe they are, I don't know, but the ones I'm talking to aren't. So, I think that's fantastic advice to really reframe your thinking, and to take that different look about, I had Neil Schaefer on here, and he was
Yep.
talking about, micro and nano
Yep.
influencers and that sort of thing, and that's basically the same concept. But the way you all have gone about it really kind of, it makes me smile, because that's the same advice that I give people. So it's kind of good to know that I think I've been right.
And I think
So,
there's
validation.
I'd say the other opportunity, and some of this takes some creativity and depend on the type of brand and access to things. This may or may not be applicable, right? But
Sure.
we've started to do direct mail campaigns.
Mm,
And the reason why was I wanted to do something more tactile.
yeah.
We can create lists, we can ask you or pay you to be part of a video or a podcast, and all of that is phenomenal co-created content.
Hmm.
But I wanted to do something that someone could hold and touch and do something
Yep.
with.
Yep.
So we just got done something that gained a kind of lot of notoriety or a lot of content. Was we wanted to talk about our ad solution more, right? The
Mm,
Demandbase ad solution. Well, no one cares about a product feature.
right.
No one
Yeah.
is going to talk about your new shiny product or how you think people are going to perceive your product,
Right.
right? So we took a step back and I said, like I said, I want to do something tactile, but how can I pull together a campaign that will best represent our ad solution, but in a fun way?
Right.
Like I said, our mantra is, that B2B doesn't have to be boring.
Right.
And so we ended up coming in. If I would have thought about it, I'd pull it off, but it's on my shelf behind me. We came up with a unicorn. So a unicorn pinata.
Nice.
So we sent this to about 65 people that we
That's
had
awesome.
identified that met the persona, right? That
Right.
we cared about, demand gen, decision makers, so director plus, and typically most companies. And the message that went along with it when I reached out to them was around having a unicorn ad solution,
Mm,
right? Because in our viewpoint, our viewpoint is we have the best ad solution. Well, we're so used to in SaaS and in Silicon Valley, unicorn companies. Well, ad solution, those in my mind went together, so that's what we
sure.
went with. And the kind of carrot of that was that if people shared it, we would send them Sprinkle Grove Cookie Company cookies. In Grove right now, if you've paid any attention on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
Grayson, who's one of the co-founders, he's everywhere. I mean, people do anything to get these cookies. So I knew the likelihood would be that, one, you're going to get this unicorn pinata. It's going to be
Right.
pretty fun. Maybe you'll share it. You'll also share it because you want the damn cookies too.
Yep. Yep.
And, so it was a fun campaign to work on, but we had
People
a
are so
lot of
predictable.
people come out and say, Demandbase thought outside the box.
Right.
It had a relevant call to action. And we even had some people say, and now I'm considering this solution. I'm going to
Hmm.
reach out to, if they're a customer like my AE or my CSM or what have you. But that was trying to think different about how to build a influencer campaign for a product launch
Hmm.
or feature, focus on a feature in a different way, right?
Right.
So again, it doesn't have to be, John, we came out, like, you and I built a relationship because maybe we put you on this list, or I know you and I want to
Hmm.
pay you to go, shill for our company. And so, make this video or be on our podcast or write this blog post and say how great our solution is. Your
For the records,
community.
I've received 0 cookies to date. I just want to put that out
Well,
there. So
we can solve that,
I
but
appreciate that. Yeah, thank
you you know you would look at it and go either no, or you take the money and your community see right through it,
yeah.
right? Or maybe you get an email that says, we want to send you a unicorn pinata. And you're like, wait,
Huh?
a B2B brand wants to send me a unicorn pinata and
Right.
then they want to send me sprinkle cookies after the fact. Sure.
I'd pay attention to that.
Like,
Why not?
fine. This sounds
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what that campaign did. And it ended up having influence on pipeline. It obviously drove a ton of brand metrics,
Mhm.
reach and engagement, all that stuff, all because we tried to think outside the box as a brand, not the usual guardrails that we've been told have to exist.
It's fantastic. It's funny because there's so many things that are happening, especially in B2B marketing, that I'm not certain most of the smaller companies are even aware of. And I believe that that's going to change. And one of the things that's happening quite a bit, and it's kind of part of your role as well at Demandbase, is private communities like Slack are playing a very significant role in fostering collaboration and engagement. But what are some commonly overlooked or underestimated elements within private community-based strategies that you think deserve more attention, or for enhancing collaboration and engagement among these B2B professionals? Because this is not something I've really talked about a lot or looked heavily into. I'm really curious what you're doing with it, and how it's working, and what you think is going to happen in the future with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a community called Revenue Circle, and it's a community specifically and exclusively for VPs and above in sales and marketing roles, right? So
Right.
VPs up through CMOs, CROs, CSOs, whatever the title is at the C-suite for your company. And we built that community not as a customer community, not to try to sell any of our product features.
Mm,
It all that's walled off, and I ensure that. Um, but it's a community for like-minded folks to get together, to have a little fun, to provide job opportunities or ask for help, to share research, to just have a kind of watering hole to spend a few minutes out of their day in.
it's almost it reminds me almost of the good old days in social media, except it's more
Private.
private. Yeah. which
But I
which
think that,
almost makes it much better.
yeah, I think that the big opportunity for brands, though, besides consideration of building your own community, the piece on that, just on the side, is that if you're going to do that, you have to realize that you're committed for
Mhm.
as long as you can have someone focused on it,
Right.
because you can't just neglect it next week. It's not a shiny toy for this week, because then you'll
Right.
you'll you know
You look like
damage
a fool.
trust. Yeah, and you'll damage trust. But
Right.
in all the broader communities that exist out there, conversations are happening every day about your product or the features that you offer or about your competitors.
Yeah.
So these conversations, these references, and everything like that aren't happening on Google anymore. They're
Mhm.
happening in these private communities. So
Mhm.
someone might say, "Hey, does anyone have any experience with, you know, Salesforce versus HubSpot?"
Right.
Or, "We're looking for a new CRM that has these features." And
Mhm.
the community is going to naturally provide their opinion. There's one community called MoPros, and it's for marketing operations professionals. So people in that community talk about tech stacks and ask for feature sets. I can guarantee you that anyone that offers any type of tech stack or any type of a SaaS platform that might be listening to this, a conversation is happening in that
Yep.
platform.
Yep.
And if you're not present, you can't, give an opinion on your brand.
Mhm.
You can't showcase thought leadership on the topic,
Yep.
or your competitors are in there.
Yep.
Now, of course, you don't want to just come in there and say, I'm from this company and I'll, go get a demo and we're the best known to mankind.
Mhm.
Where you're really smart if you do this is you're just active, you're
Right.
contributing to the conversation, and by default, right, as a personal brand, people know who you're associated with. So
Mhm.
people know me, being Justin, they know that I work at Demandbase, and if they have a question, maybe they associate that with me. Even better is to go one step further and work with your customers to activate them in these communities to help source. So what we've done is working with our customer marketing team, we look for opportunities for them to engage in these communities.
Mhm.
And so if for us it's on, well, us versus a competitor, or on technographics or firmographics or ABM, or these different features that we provide within the products, within the product, or that you can have activated,
Right.
they'll go into these communities, sometimes more than one, and they'll say, yeah, I evaluated these vendors and we chose to go with Demandbase because they provided me with A to Z. And sometimes, maybe that peels off into a private conversation, or
Mhm.
someone says, "Oh yeah, great. Like I'd love to chat more." That's where this power of private communities really comes from for these third-party private communities
Yeah.
come from for brands. It's personal branding for those that want to and can be involved. And also, the conversations are definitively happening in those communities, in the right ones, right? Because there's thousands of them, but in the right communities are where conversations are happening about your brand.
I've seen it also on Discord.
Yep,
There's a lot of tech
absolutely.
chatter and private communities on Discord, and high security leaks of government documents. But that's
That little thing.
that little snafu.
But the
Um,
best one on, I'd say the best community on Discord, if someone's looking for it, is Joe Polizzi's The Tilt. Joe
yes.
has built a phenomenal community on
Yep.
Discord.
Yep. And this is the type of thing that I think a lot of smaller companies are maybe not yet aware of, and they probably don't even realize what is out there and what they can get access to. So just you sort of shining a light on that, I think, is important. Everything you've basically described in this chat, I think, is kind of actionable, and probably will be very eye-opening for people who watch this. So Justin, this was great. This was a lot of fun. I absolutely appreciate your time, and yeah, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Have a great day, everybody.